Like, everybody thinks they're a loser. I've fucked up everything I've ever done 100 times. There's no other way to do it.
Is there advice you can give to people, to young kids that are living through a shitty situation of any sort, a tough life?
Find a thing you like. Try to find a thing that you really enjoy. Try to find a thing that you're passionate about.
Like an activity.
Yes. For me, early on, it was drawing. It was illustrations. It was comic books. I wanted to be a comic book illustrator. And then it went from comic book drawing and illustrations to martial arts. So, but it was just another thing that I was very, very passionate about. And that was my vehicle out of my dilemma. That was my vehicle out of my own anxiety and trauma and my own issues and insecurities. And find something. Find a thing that you genuinely enjoy, because getting good at things you genuinely enjoy is extremely beneficial for young people, because it lets you know that, like, everybody thinks they're a loser. Every young person thinks they're a loser. At least a young person in the situation I was at. Like, I didn't know I wasn't a loser until I started winning, until I started doing martial arts. Martial arts taught me that, like, I could get better at stuff, that I wasn't really a loser. I just was someone who was, like, in a fucked up situation. But you could channel all that energy that you have as a young person into something and get better at it. And then all of a sudden people admired me. I was like, this is crazy. So I went from being someone who was incredibly insecure and basically a failure to someone who was really successful at this one thing that was very dangerous, that other people were scared of. And that gave me immense confidence and also a real understanding of the direct correlation between hard work and success, only because I was obsessed with it. But then I knew there was no way I was ever going to be able to hold a regular job. And then I got lucky when I was 21 and I found stand-up. And so from then on, I'd kind of like locked into this thing where I'm just going to do what I like and fuck what everybody says, because everybody's giving me advice to do this and advice to do that. And there's a lot of people out there like that. And for some awful reason, they never find whatever it is that can break them free. They never catch a ride on that river out.
Yeah.
You know, and I got lucky. I found stand-up comedy, and I had already, I think a lot of it had come from martial arts too. I'd fought a lot and I'd competed a lot in martial arts tournaments. And I think that from that, I realized that, like, these unconventional paths, they brought me something that I wasn't getting from regular life. It brought me self-esteem. It gave me this feeling that I wasn't a loser. It was the only thing that I'd ever done my whole life where I said, wow, maybe I'm not a loser. So an understanding that you can't listen to people, because even my parents didn't want me to do martial arts. They didn't want me to fight. They didn't want me to do stand-up. There's, like, you have to understand, like, who you are, and then in the face of other people's either criticism or, you know, lack of faith in your ability to succeed, you push through, and there's great benefit in that. And then you realize that you can kind of apply that to other things in life. I think having a sense of urgency is very beneficial. And understanding that your time is limited can aid you greatly. I think knowing that this is a temporary time, that we have finite lifespans, I think there's great power in that, because it motivates you, it gets you going. I think being an immortal, living forever, would be one of the most depressing things, particularly if everybody else was dying around you. And I think one of the things that makes life so interesting and fascinating is that it doesn't last. You know, that you really get a brief amount of time here. And really, by the time you're just starting to kind of figure yourself out and who you are and how not to screw things up so bad, it's like, time's up.
The ride's over.
When I was 21, I quit my job teaching. I was teaching at Boston University. I was teaching Taekwondo there. And I knew, and I also had my own school in Revere. I knew I couldn't do it right and also be doing stand-up comedy. I knew I couldn't do both of those things. There was no way.
You have to be cognizant of that obsessive force within you to make sure.
Yes. I have to know how to manage my mental illness.
In a way, discipline is art too.
Yes. Discipline is art. Yeah, I think it is because it's beautiful for me to see. When I see someone who's really truly disciplined, who like a David Goggins, someone who just like truly maximizes the grind, I feel like there's an art to that. I've always had weird discipline. I have much more discipline for things now as a grown man than I did when I was young. When I was young, I had very little discipline, but I had a lot of obsession.
Does being a father contribute to that?
Yeah. You feel like you have more responsibilities. Also, I understand that with discipline comes reward. You appreciate things that you do and manifest and create because you had to work hard to do them, because you forced yourself to work when you didn't want to. You're like, well, look, I didn't want to work, but bam, look what happened because of that. I got this now. I accomplished that. I wrote that. There it is. It's the proof that you have to discipline yourself. Because when I was young, like with Taekwondo and those things, it was only about obsession. Like my discipline was not good. I was not a disciplined person.
Right.
I didn't want to do a bunch of stuff that wasn't fun. But I was so obsessed with getting better at martial arts that it was easy to look disciplined.
I got you.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. It makes a lot of sense, actually.
But it was all fun to me, so it wasn't really discipline. I was obsessed. There's a difference. As you get older, you understand the rewards of discipline, that it's a good thing. And it's good to also have a certain amount of control at all times over your impulses. And I didn't have any of that when I was young. I was very impulsive. I was a wild motherfucker, I was barely raised. My parents were barely around when I was a kid.
Really?
So, yeah, I grew up doing wild shit, and they never had a fucking clue. They didn't know anything. So I was completely impulsive, by the time I had graduated high school and then was out on my own, living with my friends, by the time, but I was like 20 or something like that when I first moved out. When I was living with my friends, we were a bunch of savages. I was living with these other guys that I did Taekwondo with. That's part of it, yeah. Writing, I really realized the discipline really came into play with my writing. Like sometimes I didn't feel like writing, but you have to write, even if you're a professional comic, man, you have to write. Like when I have friends that are professional comics that don't actually sit down and write, and I'm like, you're selling yourself short. Like, oh, I write on stage. I'm like, yeah, I do too. But you got to write. You got to sit down and you got to write. Because if you don't, you're going to have less ideas. You're going to have less things that you've considered. You're going to have less topics to explore. And I talked to a buddy who just writes in the car. He never writes, but he just drives around his car and comes up with ideas. I'm like, all right, that's a method too, but you really should write. Because when you actually sit down and write something, whether it's a pen to a piece of paper or whether it's writing in front of a computer, it takes, like, you write the word strategy. Well, it takes much longer to write the word strategy than it does to consider the concept of strategy.
Right.
So while you're writing it, you're putting more thought and more consideration into things.
You open more doors when you write it down.
Yeah,
For sure.
For sure. It's like I've fucked up everything I've ever done 100 times. There's no other way to do it. And I've had a bunch of shitty breaks. Everybody has. But you got to realize when you have those shitty breaks what that is. It's an opportunity for you to reassess, reboot, get better, figure out another way, find another way through. It's just little challenges. If you show up and put in the time and focus your energy on that, the ideas, they will arrive. They will arrive. And that's the same with writing comedy. Like there's been many, many times where I'll come home from the comedy store and I just sit down and I start writing and I got nothing. There's nothing there. I'm just writing. It's all bullshit. Nothing's good. It's just like, and then all of a sudden, bam, there's the idea. And then all of a sudden I can't stop. And then, a couple hours later and I'm like, whoa. And then the next night I'm on stage and I'm like, how about that? Yeah. Boom! It gets this big laugh. I'm like, holy shit. And I know that came out of the discipline to sit down and call the muse. Not being fucking lazy and just doing it. Yeah. That's like 90% of it is just showing up. Get there and start working. Like, you're not going to feel perfect every day. If I only worked out when I felt good, I'd be a fat fuck. Because there's a lot of days I don't want to do it. It's pretty much the same with everybody that actually gets good at something. There's got to be those days you push through, and they're probably going to be more numerous than the days you don't. And then when you are in front of that keyboard and you look down the count, it says I got 1,000 words today. I put 1,000 words in. You're doing the work, and out of that work, gems blossom, little things. But you might have a day where you just write nothing but dog shit. So what? Show up again tomorrow. Like these ideas, they weasel their way into your head. And it seems to me also that the frequency that your mind operates under has to be correct. Because one of the things about creativity seems to be, if you think about yourself a lot, if you're really into yourself or your image or you're selfish, those ideas they don't find you.
Yeah, it's
Like,
funny.
the
It stifles the creative. Yeah. It stifles the opportunity that the idea has to finding.
Yes. It requires a humility and it requires a detachment from self in order to create. Like when I'm writing, I'm blank. I'm just staring. I'm just the part of my mind that's active is not like me. It's like this weird core function part where I'm not aware of my personality. I'm not aware of anything.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to put it together in a way that I know works.
Yeah, just being there, being present. That's what Pressfield is. Just, I'm a big believer, just sitting there, even staring at a blank page.
Have to
putting in the time.
Yeah. And sometimes it's not that way. Sometimes it's an inspiration. Like sometimes I'll be sitting there at dinner and I'll be like, I'll be right. I got an idea. And my wife's really cool about that. I'm like, I have an idea. And I have to just run out of the room real quick and I write it down on my phone and then I can come back, because those are like little gifts that you get sometimes from the universe out of nowhere. And some people rely only on those gifts, and I've talked to comics about it. They're like, I can't come up with my best ideas when I don't write. And I'm like, no, I do too. I come up with great ideas when I don't write, but I also write. Like you can do both of those things. They're not mutually exclusive.